Musical Talk, the UK independent musical theatre podcast.
Hello ladies and gentlemen, welcome to episode number 262 of Musical Talk. That will please the OCD sufferers as it's a numeric palindrome. I'm joined here by a voice from whom you've not heard for about 1,000 million years in the podcast. This is TV's Jonathan Cohen. Hello.
Hello, and this is a voice from the past.
How are you?
I'm extremely well, Nick.
We are sitting in your new kitchen area, which has been a year in the making, and it's very exciting, it's very nice.
Yeah, and all you listeners will be so jealous, I can't even begin to tell you. It's gorgeous, isn't it?
We'll put a picture on Twitter for everyone.
That's an idea.
Two things today. You're going to hear an interview with Bertie Carvel, who is about to, well, at the time this goes out, he will be playing Miss Trunchbull at the RSC's production of Matilda at the Cambridge Theatre, which we reviewed last year. We'll be talking about a bit, I'm sure, in the podcast in weeks to come. But for the moment, I want to talk to you about a musical, or is it, called Backbeat, which is opened at the Duke of York's Theatre. Now, I'm here with Jonathan Cohen. Jonathan didn't see the show, but the show we did see together was Jersey Boys. In my theory, Jersey Boys is a one-act play fleshed out with songs. Would you agree with that, Jonathan?
Broadly speaking, I would, yes. I mean, it's jukeboxy, isn't it? Is that what a jukebox musical is?
I don't think it is a jukebox musical, because the songs, you could take them away and still tell the story, couldn't you?
You could.
It's not as if they...
Oh, I see what you mean, yes.
It's not as if they met a girl and she walked like a man, you know.
Yeah.
So in that aspect, I don't think it is a musical at all, really. I mean, there is a bit in Jersey Boys where his daughter's just died and he sings a song which is beautiful, and that's very effective. But it's still a one-act play fleshed out with songs.
Yes, I expect you're right, really.
Very good songs.
Extremely.
In a way, I think this is what Backbeat is.
Okay.
As I said on our Twitter feed, we like the puns in Backbeat because it's got 3 references, as far as I can tell. It's a backstory of the Beatles. It's about, is it Pete Sutcliffe?
Yeah.
The 5th Beatle, as he's known as.
Yep.
Most people think the Beatles is just Ringo Starr, Paul McCartney, John Lennon and George Harrison, but in the late 50s, well, in the very early 60s, it wasn't. Ringo Starr wasn't in the Beatles, it was another drummer called Best.
Yeah, Pete Best.
Pete Best.
And of course, when they were in Hamburg, which is where they got all their experience and started to make headlines, really.
Which is what the show is all about.
Yeah, I'm sure it is. The thing is, I certainly remember the Beatles when they...
Beatles were originally a quintet. There were 5 of them. Everyone knows the Beatles songs. Interestingly, that their material has never worked as jukebox musicals.
There was a show over here that I saw called John, Paul, George, Ringo and... Bert, I think it was called. I'm not quite sure what the Bert was, but that was sort of about the 5th Beatle at the time. And Barbara Dickson sang all the songs from the orchestra pit, something like that. Maybe it was Pete, I don't remember. But it was a very good show. They had a very good quartet playing the Beatles, and Barbara Dickson sang all the songs from the piano and that.
Well, that's interesting, because it sounds quite similar then. So obviously this story has been told, but Backbeat, it's a backstory of the Beatles.
Yeah.
There's a lyric in one of the songs called Rock and Roll Music, which goes, as a backbeat, you can't lose it.
Yeah, that's right. Backbeat actually means the offbeat, doesn't it, in pop music? If you're going 1, 2, 3, 4, it's 1, down, on the offbeat.
My father and I actually went to this production, and he absolutely adored it. Mm-hmm. He's not a big musicals fan, so he didn't quite know what to expect, and he certainly didn't get a musical because it's not a musical. They're not... it's just every time there's a scene change, they had a great rock and roll number. The band were absolutely out of this world, and by that I mean the actor musicians. And the sound was phenomenal, but sadly it was quite a quiet evening. It was a Tuesday night we went, and I don't know, there were quite a couple of holes in the stalls.
Right.
And at a show like that, I find it quite uncomfortable sitting in a theatre that isn't, rocking and rolling.
Yeah, because you're supposed to be sort of getting up on your feet.
Yeah, which you do at the end, but it obviously wasn't.
And they did, I'm assuming.
I mean, the stalls were quite full, but it wasn't... I mean, it's quite the Duke of York's Theatre where it's playing is quite a small theatre anyway. Yeah. I just felt a bit sort of self-conscious, perhaps, the fact that, the cast are working so hard.
And this wasn't a preview, it was a preview.
No,
it's really open.
And it's a full...
Oh, interesting.
But I guess a Tuesday night in October isn't really the kind of
I don't know. Tuesday night's never a great night for the theatre, I don't think, over here. But then, of course, it is a Glasgow Citizens production, isn't it? And they're famous, aren't they, for putting on really interesting new stuff. It was a real front runner. I mean, people would travel from miles around to go out to the Glasgow Cits. But then, God, this is embarrassing. I can't remember the guy whose company it was. He did Travels with My Aunt. He was absolutely wonderful. This is terrible. I can't remember. He's so famous. When he left, I think Glasgow Cits lost something of its sort of innovatory feel, really.
Very interesting design for this show. Again, it was very similar to Jersey Boys. It was projections, quite a stale industrial set with kind of cabins at the back. The back part of the stage would open up and the band would come forward, and it would double as a recording studio, and there was an upper level where things would happen. It works incredibly well. It's a very, very enjoyable story, but it's not a musical. But it could be. I mean, it's this kind of, is it a play with songs? Is it a jukebox back catalogue show? There is a film of Backbeat, of course, which my dad knew, and the book for this play is written by the same chap who wrote and directed the film. And my dad said it was vastly superior to the film, which is good. Cause
I don't remember there being a film, but
it was 1994, so it's quite a newish film. And what's great about it is the cast is very young. They're very, they're all fresh out of various colleges, Central, Arts Ed, and all the rest of them. Rose Bruford.
I mean, I'm assuming that it takes us through from the Germany, the Hamburg times, does it?
This is a bit I loved, where they're sitting down, Paul and John, writing the song we now know as Love, Love Me Do. But originally he was just singing, Love Me Do, Love Me Do. And then Paul said, accent the love, because love is all about sex. So love, love me do. And then at the end, urge it, please love me do, as in please have sex with me. Then he played the songs that we know, so that was very interesting, but that was at the very end of the play. This is just about Stuart Sutcliffe's rather sad life. He's an artist in Liverpool, he's a good friend of John Lennon's, and he teaches him to play the bass, even though he can only play in A, because that means he only has to press about 2 strings. All the songs with A major to begin with, all the rock and roll covers that they did, because he died of a brain aneurysm, didn't he?
Yes, I think he did, yes.
And that's very moving on stage. So it's a very strong play, but don't go expecting the songs to move the plot forward, because the songs stop the plot.
Right, and they just sing them.
And they just sing, they'll do a sort of...
Actually, as an adjunct to you talking about Love Me Do and then discussing it, Paul McCartney, years and years ago, back in the 60s, was at a party at the singer Al McCogan, and he actually, the Al McCogan's flat, he used the piano to do Yesterday, and that was when he came up with Scrambled Eggs, which he wrote on a napkin. Because it was just anything to try and fit the tune at the time.
What do you think of the music of the Beatles?
I mean, their first album had a couple of Tamla Motown numbers on it, so they were really very, very influenced by Tamla Motown. There's a lot of people were in those days, not that we knew much. The general public didn't know much about Tamla Motown. Certainly anybody who was in the business did know. Things like Money, which was, I think, the Temptations, or one of those, the Miracles, or something like that. And even Twist and Shout wasn't theirs, but it became a huge hit, of course. What do I think of the music? I think, like most people, I think you would say that they changed the face of pop music in many ways. I mean, interesting harmonies, interesting vocal harmonies as well. And, of course, they got better and better, didn't they? Or certainly more inventive as they went on.
And that's what you certainly get in this show. You certainly get the progression from a couple of Liverpool lads with teddy boy haircuts and leather jackets till eventually they become the iconic image of the Beatles with those wonderful sort of collarless shirts, which the play in essence is about the relationship between Stuart Sutcliffe and Astrid Kircher, who was this woman that Stuart Sutcliffe was madly in love with. And Astrid Kircher is a famous photographer who took very early photos of the Beatles. Absolutely. And the play alludes to the fact that she designed the costumes.
Oh, okay.
That the Beatles wore.
Well, those shiny
those black, those grey suits with no collars. And she said, why don't you put the hair like that?
Which, of course, I mean, can you believe it? I mean, people are up in arms about that. Certainly parents were, because they just thought they looked a mess. And, of course, now it just looks so ordinary, it just isn't true. So it just shows...
They looked like girls, didn't they? I mean, that was...
A little bit. But when they shook their heads, you know, all the hair bounced around.
The chap playing Paul McCartney does that, and he's standing, you know, playing the guitar the wrong way round, I must say. They allude to that in the programme. We apologise that Paul McCartney in his production is not left-handed.
Right.
But who would know? I mean, you know, I notice. And
avid Beatles fans certainly would, and they'd be up in arms about that.
But he shook his head around, and it's nice because it didn't seem like a tribute show because it wasn't the Beatles we knew. It was this kind of, it was the very, very, it's the early Beatles. Ones, yeah. And I think this goes, I mean, the play starts in 1960 and goes all the way to 1963.
I mean, my younger sister remembers going to see the Beatles, and it must have been about 1962 or 63 at the Hammersmith, it was then the Hammersmith Odeon. And of course they were all screaming and nobody could hear a single thing they did. But I mean, they all went absolutely mental. I mean, they were so big, it's impossible to think. I don't think any other group's been as big as that. And they sustained it. That was the amazing thing. And this, you know, the transient went to pop music.
Until Yoko Ono appeared and everything went slightly pear-shaped.
Well, except that John Lennon did keep writing songs.
Shame it was imagined. But what's great about this show is not audience participation, but they use the space very well. There's lots of people coming into the audience and urging us to get up and dance, which did work on a Tuesday night. But it's just the band. These act musicians were so brilliant. I think it's some of the best, and I haven't seen Million Dollar Quartet, so I don't know what they're like, but you have.
But they were brilliant, absolutely.
Just the standard is so high.
Yeah.
I mean,
I don't know where they get them from quite.
Have I interested you in seeing this production at all?
I think so, yeah. I think so. I mean, there was a point when I just thought, oh, do I really have to listen to any more things about the Beatles? But I think, yeah, probably. I mean, the musicianship's so good, it certainly sounds worth going.
I think it's a hard sell because it doesn't scream Beatles.
No, what was the age range of the audience that you noticed?
I was probably the youngest person there.
That's quite likely.
And I'm not a spring chicken myself. The cast were incredibly young because they're playing, you know,
of course, they're in the youth, yeah.
And interestingly, I think it was George Harrison they got thrown out of Germany because George Harrison at the time was only 16.
Oh,
when they were playing in Hamburg. So it certainly opens your eyes and makes you realise what a troubled pre-existence the Beatles had.
Oh yes, I mean, nothing's ever quite that simple, is it? I mean, all we saw in the early days was them suddenly being there.
Getting off that plane in the States.
Yeah, all that stuff. Even before then, you know, they were everywhere. I mean, every newspaper was you know, they were headline news all the time. But of course, there's an awful lot of, you know, hard work and back-breaking work before that.
Backbeat is playing at the Duke of York's Theatre. If you're a fan of rock and roll and very, very strong storytelling on stage, I do urge you to certainly check it out. If you're a fan of the Beatles and want to know more about them, it's certainly an interesting way to learn their backstory.
Yeah.
Another big show opening very soon is Matilda, the musical, by the RSC Theatre in Stratford-upon-Avon. It's opening at the Cambridge Theatre. I was lucky enough to sit down with Bertie Carvel, who is playing the best villain in the whole of literacy history, Miss Trunchbull.
And there, just like I said, the stinky maggot rears his head. Even the squittiest, piteous mess can harbour seeds of stinkiness. Have you ever seen anything more repellent? Have you ever smelled anything worse than that smell of rebellion? The stench of revolt, the reek of insubordination, the breath of resistance, the pang of dissent. And I will not stop till you are squashed, till this rebellion is quashed, till glorious sweaty discipline has washed this sickening stench away.
Musical Talk, the UK independent musical theatre podcast.
A year ago, we went to see Matilda the musical at the Courtyard Theatre in Stratford-upon-Avon. I'm now in its new and lifelong home, I think is the term I will call it, here with Miss Trunchbull, a.k.a. Bertie Carvel, who's you don't know anything like her.
No, it's a pleasure to transform.
Transform and transfer, because you originated the role in Stratford through wind and snow and everything else. You survived all the performances.
Yeah, I was living on a houseboat at the time. I'd spent a couple of Christmases in that part of the world on houseboats. And so I went home every night from the tech and previews to find my boat increasingly frozen into the Stratford Canal.
You meant you couldn't go anywhere.
That's true, no, but I think at the time it was far further from Stratford than I'd intended to spend most of my time. So, no, we braved wind and snow, and so did audiences. It was great.
It was just a triumph, wasn't it?
It was, if I do say so myself.
A miracle, one might say.
A miracle. It was. There's something quite... You know, I did a show a few years ago called Coram Boy, and I revived that a year later. And I have a similar experience with this, which is a feeling that actually there's something about the show that's bigger than any one of its parts, and indeed the sum of its parts. And there's something quite... It's a privilege to be part of something like that, where you just... I don't want to jinx it, because we haven't started our previews yet, but there's something kind of special in the matrix of things that make it up that makes it very, very exciting to be kind of along for the ride, you know.
It's nominated for awards already.
It is.
Won some awards last year, didn't it?
I think so. I think it won...
You're nominated for awards. Congratulations.
I am, thank you. I think it won the Critics' Circle Award, is that right? No, which is lovely. I mean, it's great to be recognised in that way.
And they're completely tearing this theatre apart, aren't they?
As we speak, they've done a fantastic... I'm not going to give it away, I wouldn't spoil any surprises, but the through design of the building, as you know from seeing the show in Stratford, the design of the show that Rob Howell's done, it kind of explodes out of the stage and into the auditorium, and
beyond. And
he's gone even further. Yeah, so and I'm just seeing those little touches. In fact, I don't spend very much time front of house because obviously I'm rehearsing. But I wandered in from front of house this morning and just seeing what they're doing there. And I mean, it's fantastic.
I've seen the blackboard.
Right. Okay. Well, I think there are going to be a few of those, and yeah, it's very clever. I mean, it's an obvious thing to do, really, isn't it? Like you want people to step in to the world of what you're doing when people come to the theatre. I think that's what the theatre sort of does best, and maybe better than any other dramatic art form. And the reason it hasn't died out is that people kind of can just fully join in.
Listening to the CD and saw the show, you are blessed with sort of Eminem meets Gilbert and Sullivan meets Stephen Sondheim, aren't you, with these words that Tim Minchin has thrust upon you?
Yeah, he's brilliant. I mean,
the art of classroom mastering is the mystery of classroom.
The art of classroom mistressing.
The simpering and whimpering, the dribbling and the spittling, the missigning a tissue, it's an issue we can fix. There is no mystery to mastering the art of classroom mistressing. It's discipline. The smell of rebellion, the stench of rebellion. I mean, there's more clever lines than you can shake a stick at, but what's particularly good, and I don't know very much, I don't really know the kind of musical theatre repertoire very well, and but I'm getting to, but what's very clear from what I've been lucky enough to do and things that I look around and like, and is good musical theatre writing is obviously good dramatic writing. And what is brilliant about Tim's songs is that they are driven by character and story, and so I'm an actor, really. I don't really consider myself a singer, and the only reason I'm able to do it at all well is because there's a character in a situation and you can immerse yourself in that, and hopefully you can hold a tune at the same time. And they're very wonderful tunes too. And having said that, they're also brilliant tunes. They're very brilliantly constructed, and it's sort of been amazingly orchestrated by Chris Nightingale. It's kind of underscored. Yeah, I mean, and that's another thing I think about. I've got very limited experience really of the repertoire, like I say. But one of the things that's so much fun about working on a new musical, or my other experiences have been Coram Boy, which was also kind of underscored freshly by Adrian Sutton, and with Parade, because Jason Rob Brown was with us in that rehearsal process, kind of recreating it.
Just over the road.
And quite, and the ability to kind of make sure that the underscoring is matching your so it's sort of narrating your thinking, I think is just thrilling. And yeah, Tim's music does that brilliantly.
Not many people will know, but you have a song called The Hammer, and the opening of that is in 5/4, which is very irregular.
So it is,
which sort of represents your slightly warped, mad thinking.
Look at these trophies, see how my trophies gleam in the sunlight, see how they shine. What do you think it took to become English hammer-throwing champion? 1969, do you think in that...
We're very quickly going to get to the kind of the end of my music theory knowledge, but I'll keep going with this one. What it does is it kind of... I think it sort of drives, to my ear anyway, there's an impatience to it, and a kind of... It's an uncomfortable time signature, isn't it? So there's something very irregular and impatient and urgent about it, and I think that's probably quite... I mean, it's a brilliant musical expression of Miss Trunchbull, actually, and this person who is sort of deeply unhappy and unresolved, and would sing in such a way, especially when she's got a bee in her bonnet.
One thing I read a lot in the reviews, and I'm not the biggest Shakespeare expert, do you think there's an element of Richard III in Miss Trunchbull?
Well, I mean, there's clear similarities in the performance, I suppose. We worked and are still working to recreate, and we worked for a very long time to kind of get her physicality and the body shape right, and also going back to first principles and saying, okay, well, how old is she? What has she done? What says she's been a child athlete, and that that gives us certain clues, and we know that she's not. She's jealous of her very acrobatic sister, and she's a hammer thrower. And in fact, I had some coaching with Malcolm Fenton, who's an amazing. He coaches hammer throwing coaches throughout England, and he was showing me photographs of when he used to compete and this enormous trapezius muscle that he had. So we kind of took that clue, and so anyway, go back to Richard III. She has this sort of hunchbacked appearance in this version anyway, and so that's an obvious similarity. And I don't know whether the cultural consciousness sort of has bled in maybe somehow. But she hasn't got a short black bob, and I haven't built up my nose or anything. And
it's amazing what Dennis Kelly, who's written the book, was able to do. He was able to sort of take the character and throw more at it.
Dennis has been very clever, because I think the challenge with any adaptation is to people. A lot of people are coming to see it because they love the source material, or they've seen the film, or they've read the book, or whatever it is. And then the point surely is that when they come for whatever reason, maybe because they loved what they think they're going to see, they see something that's fresh and they couldn't have expected. And he has taken this story that is very well loved and kind of rotated it through 90 degrees and added original material that absolutely feels like it comes from the story, but that makes dramatic sense of something that in a novel form was kind of episodic. And you could have revelations towards the end of the book that don't necessarily play through in the same way as an actor would have to carry them through, and he's absolutely fleshed that out and given us the signposts as actors to kind of hit the ground running right at the start of the play, but also the kind of backstories of the characters feature in a very clever way in Dennis's version, that allows you to play those iconic scenes that people will remember, like the scene where Miss Trunchbull throws a child out of the window, which sort of have to be there really to honour people's memory of it, and all of those scenes and vignettes, but without them just being vignettes, because there's there's a kind of skeleton that binds them together, and he's found a way of doing that apparently separately to the rest of the story, but actually it's all tied together, and it's great food for actors, because what we like to do is to kind of make sense of a situation and understand what's gone before and why what happens next as a result of it. So I mean, he's a genius. They're both geniuses. I'm working with a full complement of geniuses.
That's what's fascinating about this show, as I've said before. It seems to be Matthew Walker's, Paul Keeve, Chris Nightingale, Rob Howell. They're the sort of big talents in London at the moment. They've got another show called Ghosts playing, and it just seems everything they do is phenomenal.
Crossing my fingers as you say that. Only for luck, because one doesn't want to jinx something. You're absolutely right. I mean, what can I say? And I'm really excited, and we know it was a tremendous success in Stratford. What's exciting is, I mean, the best thing about this job is when you are really excited about what you're doing, but and you can't wait to share it with people, but you're also terrified that this is the thing about anything live, I suppose, you're terrified, what if something happens between now and the opening night, or tomorrow night, or tonight, and that you're never sure what's going to, and there's a massive element of uncertainty. So even though we've got lots of things, the wind's definitely blowing in the right direction, I'm really excited to see whether people still enjoy it, and new audiences who haven't seen it before, and in half a new cast, because most of the children who are in the show, who are the stars of the show, are doing it for the first time. There's still everything to play for, and it's by no means a given that this is going to be the success that we all hope it's going to be. But yeah, I mean.
But like you, I can feel that aroma around this show. Can you feel an aroma? No, an aura is the term I mean. I can feel the aura that is surrounding this show, and I just think, in my lifetime, it's the first Roald Dahl musical there's ever been on stage. It is a great story about kids winning. And it's a great thing to introduce children to introduce the theatre to young kids. For many it will be their first theatrical experience, and they'll get bitten by the bug.
I don't know what anyone's expecting seeing a bunch of kids on stage. And again, I'll cross my fingers because I don't want to jinx this, but I think part of the magic is that they're not sort of all singing well, they are all singing all dancing kids, but they're not. Yeah, there's a sort of guilelessness about a truthfulness and innocence about the way the kids perform, which is just delightful, and is it's what you pay to see great actors do, actually, which is to sort of not act. Apparently, they're apparently just being themselves in that situation, and you can't see the joins between. And when it really works like that, and you're seeing. I mean, that's what great acting is, isn't it? You can't see the joins. You might as well be seeing that actor on his night off. And you don't know. I mean, you don't know unless you listen to the podcast with them in the dressing room what they're really like in real life. And you're just apparently seeing something. And there's a sort of charm about it, because we've got real kids who don't have, there's a sort of, I mean this in a positive way, a kind of lack of sophistication about what they're doing. They're not sort of trying to present something to you. They're just doing it. And they're living in their imaginations, and it's absolutely joyous to be part of, and to share the stage with them.
In a way, the greatest compliment to you would be for you to just walk outside the stage door and no one come up to you, because you play such a different character.
Yeah. That
people won't recognise you in your natural
absolutely
form.
And yes, I've enjoyed that pleasure many a time.
Yeah. For those who haven't seen Matilda, it is a fabulous production, and I wish it all the best of luck at the Cambridge Theatre in London. You have had a couple of issues. It has delayed its opening, but once this goes up, it will be ready to go. It will be rocking and rolling, and all the best of luck with the previews and opening night and the Olivier's and all the stuff that will probably Royal Variety performance as well that will follow, and things we hope.
We'll see. We'll concentrate on delighting our audiences first, yeah.
But nobody else is gonna turn it right for me. Nobody but me is gonna change my story. Sometimes you have to be a little bit
Maggots.
naughty.
Bertie Carvel there, Jonathan Cohen, thank you very much for contributing something to Musical Talk.
It's a pleasure. Yes, I actually contributed something this time. Precisely something.
Yes, we'll have you on again soon, because you're quite useful. And thank you very much for listening, and we'll see you next week.
Goodbye.
Bye. This episode of Musical Talk was presented by Nick Hudson and Jonathan Cohen, and edited by Nick Hudson. Copyright 2011, except with the songs where the copyright persists with the original creators.
We've got London's best diggers outside. I was trying to find somewhere quiet to think this morning, and it's absolutely impossible wherever you go in Covent Garden.